Good afternoon, my friends, and good day to you. You're tuned into Feather of Light. Right now I'm top of Eagle Mountain on a very snowy day, and I hiked up to the top here just to feel the quiet energy of this mountain as it's covered in more snow than usual, and felt really good. It was a bit more challenging of a hike, but I really embraced the quietness and slowed down and enjoyed some chai tea up along the way. So today I'd like to just gather my thoughts and enjoy this peaceful, snowy day. And what comes to mind for me, I don't really know right away what I'm going to focus on. And this is a first. It's day 7 of my no caffeine challenge. And I guess that's one thing I'd like to just notice is I'm feeling called to start to introduce more challenges into my life. Creating these self-imposed challenges, I guess you could say, more like self-agreed upon commitments. And to me, it feels like I do that, and I think I do that quite well. But I think there's something that I'm trying to call in that feels like it's beyond me and will require something that is beyond me. Whether that's calling in support from others, or calling in support from a higher power or a divine consciousness. Or maybe it just requires that I attune to this thing I call self, the healing energy, and allow that to be a clear place to lead from. I don't know, it feels like I meet challenges in my life head on, but as I've learned with coaching, and especially being coached, which I'm not currently being coached, that there's so much beyond the horizon, and resistance is very, very real. Like, resistance is very pervasive, and I would say it kind of re-manifests in a lot of ways, like similar to how you can't really fully disengage a protector part without first going into it and working with it and, getting its permission to go deeper and stuff like that. I would say resistance isn't one of those things that you can just fully release or bypass, as much as you can sort of just kind of cope with the result of not overcoming the resistance, and then it'll just show up again in a different form, and maybe a more challenging form, right? I'm going to walk and talk a little bit, and I usually don't do this for sake of noise, but maybe the snow won't be. It sounds like it probably will be making noise. You're going to hear me crunch in a bit, and then I'll find another spot to sit or to stand. Yeah. I think something was coming up as I was walking up the hill, and I can't remember quite what it was. I hope it comes back. What was it? Ugh. That's okay. I'm sure it'll come back. But what have I been doing this week as I've drank in no caffeine? I guess I've noticed how much I am sort of prone to idle states, right? Like, as we all are in some shape or form. It just feels like mainly in the evening, I suppose, but also in the morning sometimes, but mainly in the evening, where something comes up and it kind of pulls me away, and my my focus just isn't, like, I don't have a supply of focus readily available, at least later in the day as much. And then I'm just drifting off into whatever. I'm kind of, being pulled off into other directions. And it just feels like I have less autonomy, really. So I suppose that's been one of the things that, it's not the worst thing in the world. If I've defined autonomy as having the ability to choose these tasks, I almost want to recognize that that's not always the best thing, because sometimes that's coming from a place of, like, fighting. I have to sort of, in a way, bitterly fight for control of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And I think it enables protector parts that are, like, just trying to get shit done. But when there's less of that capacity to get shit done, I feel like there's less fuel for these protector parts. So I guess that's kind of one of the things I was noticing with less caffeine. I noticed there was just less fuel for these protector parts, and being less stimulated was actually really nice. And being overstimulated, or stimulated in general, I'm noticing how it doesn't necessarily equate to having motivation. I mean, yeah, or even energy in ways, because I guess it's a bit of a tangent, but I was listening to this one podcast. Aubrey Marcus was interviewing some guy that was, like, walking across the Antarctic or something, and it was a brutally long hike, right? But as he ran out of physical energy, he, like, completely fully depleted, had basically no food and nothing was in his system. It was based on the conditions. It was too cold sometimes for him to do what he needed to do to eat. But he would have to draw upon a higher power, right? He would have to connect to a source of energy, a well of energy that wasn't really coming from his body's ability to create energy. It's not like cellular energy. It's not even like he didn't have the stamina within his body. It's like, where was it coming from? Some people might say maybe there's a secondary survival system that exists, right? It could be ketosis, who knows? But I would say that to be able to overcome when your body is just completely depleted, and in a sense you're just not going to get as motivated as you need to be to do something. It's like you have to tune to something, and some would call it purpose, right? Something that motivates you in a much more substantial way. And that could also, I would say, often does, for me at least, require prayer, right? It can be that you have to attune to some type of spiritual energy, and maybe that's through meditation, maybe that's through nature, maybe that's through any form of prayer, really. And I feel it's interesting how breathwork can also play into this, where you can sometimes just be totally toasted. You're done. You're not going anywhere or doing anything. But if you take a moment to ground and focus on your breath, and maybe you do a breath of fire, if you know what that is. It's kind of like I don't know, hyper oxygenate, something like that. You're breathing through your nose in a way that's like pumping the stomach and the diaphragm, and you're going like, and basically that's introducing a lot more oxygen into the system, and it actually boosts your nervous system temporarily. So it's like, but it's not always temporary. I think it's interesting how once you interrupt the initial resistance, just trying to connect this back a little bit, once you interrupt the initial, let's just call it laziness or fatigue or slowness, it feels like you're no longer stuck in that spiral. Like there's something of a spiral where you're like, oh, I'm feeling drained, so I can't, and then you start thinking, I can't do this. I don't have the ability to do this. Maybe it's unconscious. Maybe you're consciously thinking it. And then it starts to produce emotions where maybe you're feeling kind of defeated. Maybe you're feeling kind of hopeless. Maybe you're just feeling kind of bummed out or frustrated. And that emotion in itself kind of feeds back into that same initial exhaustion. And then maybe it just kind of starts looping back in a lot of different ways. And you're basically not doing anything because you're stuck in the cycle. And I think it's so interesting how many of these little negative feedback loops exist. Not that I can get into it in depth, but because I haven't read the book yet, but I was looking ahead. Sometimes I'll do this in books, and I was noticing there's a chapter on the shame cycle. And I'm so eager, so keen to learn about the shame cycle as it's introduced in that book I've been talking about, the IFS therapy and shame and guilt, Martha Sweezy. It's like there are these cycles that just play out in our mind or in our body, and it does feel like so much of life is just interrupting these cycles. And I mean, like, I know they over the long term start to become patterns, and those patterns are much more complicated, but I'm talking just about these little 3-4 point cycles that are kind of just like a part of our moment by moment experience, or they're more likely programmed into our brain, and they're just kind of like these little neural nets that fire, and then they on some level also are outside of us. They're not just like we're not just one little point of consciousness disconnected from everything else in the universe. I would say that we're so interconnected with everything and everyone. It's only makes sense to me that these little cycles, whether it's a shame cycle, whether it's this motivation or lack of motivation cycle I was referring to, and each of these cycles could get interrupted by another person or an environment or something outside of us, or at least influenced by it, right? It's not always enough to interrupt it. And it's pretty interesting how we have that ability, how we have that ability to kind of like interrupt negative thought patterns of other people. And I think that's why coaching is so effective, and so I'm hopeful that my group coaching will kind of operate in that way, where maybe folks will come in, they've had this negative pattern or loop they've been in for so long, and for the first time someone just kind of says something, and I guess they have to be open to it as well. We'll acknowledge that maybe sometimes it's frustrating if someone says something and you're experiencing a kind of, I think it's cognitive dissonance, I don't know, it's just you're kind of just like, what, whoa, that's too much. Get overwhelmed by someone's maybe unsolicited feedback, right? That's why it's so important to invitationally offer feedback. But at the same time, sometimes someone just says something in a way. I'd say it's important that you frame things in certain ways that are nonviolent, right? NVC. So if you offer feedback or criticism, or again, there's something about this the way you offer something invitationally, or maybe you make it about your own experience, and someone kind of just relates to it. It's not being imposed upon them. They just kind of notice based on, they're listening and receptive to what you're saying. And then that can really change a person's perspective, right? That can really change a person's worldview. And I think that's what's happened for me in a lot of ways. Is I do feel like I don't want to say I like sit there and compare myself to everybody all the time, but I'm a part of a social network, and I feel like I draw a lot of wisdom from others. So I do feel like I do my best to look at my life and just try to be objective about, okay, like, how am I actually maybe making my life harder, or making more work for myself in a way. And when someone's attempting to interrupt that loop, I do my best to really receive that to my best of my ability. But can I just say, when we have protective parts, that your emotional safety has been dependent on not listening to what others say, because maybe it, creates a shame response, how challenging it can be, if it's possible at all, to really listen to what other people have to say without it becoming some kind of shame-based reaction. And I think that's one of the most important things that you can do once you start to do inner work or parts work or whatever. By the way, I want to start to reframe that word. I don't want to use the word work as much. I'm going to try to use different language when I refer to IFS, or let's call it parts. I want to say parts care. That sounds a little cheesy, but taking care of our parts, nurturing our parts, right? And just doing this type of healing or growth right? It's like I'm like stumbling over myself, not saying the word work, but what was I saying? It was basically how when you start to work with protector parts and you allow them to not feel so overly rigid in the way that they protect you, like there's more spaciousness, there's more openness. Maybe that's from having more self-energy present, maybe from them feeling less burdened with extreme beliefs about the world and about how they need to protect you because you've gone in and worked with them a little bit. But yeah, that can be so beneficial in so many ways when you're able to look at the world from a different lens, not through the lens of the protector. That ultimately, oh, and I just slipped. Oh my gosh, walking around a snowy place while talking can be kind of not dangerous. This is chill, but it can certainly be difficult in one way or another. I hope this is even really podcast worthy audio with all these little crunches of snow in the back. It might be a little bit interruptive, and if it is, I apologize. You might get some substandard quality podcast content here. I mean, it depends on what you consider substandard, I guess, but in terms of the nice quiet space for you to just relax into, maybe this will be a little bit more disruptive for some. But seriously, folks, parts work is, it's my thing. It's my perspective. But whatever you do to create a more open perspective and not feel like, in a way, you're tiptoeing around, let's just call it an emotional experience or something that might cycle into triggering shame, or then ultimately creating a further disconnect. And then if you can interrupt those patterns yourself, or maybe even just put yourself in environments, right, groups or whatever, having relationships and friendships where others interrupt your patterns more regularly, wow, it's like life's just kind of working for you versus against you. It's like everything's just kind of happening in your favor, to your benefit in a way, because it is. And yeah, I feel like not everything needs to be reframed at every given moment. I think sometimes a reframe can actually feel unhelpful. So like, I feel like I use them quite sparingly. But I feel like if we reach personal recognitions and just have that openness, right? That personality trait of openness, I'd say it allows us to comfortably sort of waltz from that victim mindset into more of a growth mindset, which isn't, by the way, always like solution focused. It's not always like you have to solve the problem. But I think the growth mindset's really cool because in a way incorporates empowerment. And you can do whatever you choose with that empowerment, right? It's not like that has to lead to becoming the problem solver and fixing everything, because that can be a part. But at the same time, recognizing having a growth mindset is just, in a way, a lens. It's a way of being that I would say can look like whatever you want. Like, what does growth look like for you? Right? It feels like we're in a bit of a coachy podcast episode, and that's cool. Maybe that's where my brain's been as I've been walking up this mountain. When I hike, I feel like I start to engage that part of my mind that's kind of coachy in a healthy way. But yeah, like, what does growth mean to you? Specifically, does it look like kicking ass and meeting all your goals? And it could. But something I've been noticing as I've been learning more about IFS parts work. Said the thing. Parts healing. Let's just call it, I don't know. Parts facilitating. Is that it sometimes is counter to the traditional coaching approach. I don't know why that word sounds so interesting. It's like coaching is traditionally about improving one's life. And for the most part, that requires you to, well, let's use the word, work pretty hard. You got to work pretty hard to improve your life. It takes a lot of consistency and effort and shifting things and leaning into discomfort and stuff people don't always do on their own. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting the more I've learned about parts work, at least when you're trying to heal the exiles, which are the more vulnerable. Traditionally, let's just say they're kind of the wounded ones in the whole system. Yeah, it doesn't really make as much sense to view it from a coaching lens. And you need to, I would say for the most part, it's much more beneficial to take off the coaching hat. And it's kind of like having additional skill sets, whether it's somatic therapy or, a trauma-informed approach or something that's a professional skill set that's trained in IFS. I mean, mostly therapists. I'm just going to say it. I think IFS is designed mostly for therapists. And for those that are coaching with IFS, I believe it's not actually meant to go to work with the same level of processing shame. In fact, it wouldn't make sense to go to a coach to process shame unless they're also trained in some sort of trauma modality that can really allow a person to sit in that shame and be safe. And I don't know, I guess I'm being a bit all or nothing with this judgment, but this is just from my lens of what I've learned from Richard Schwartz and how he views IFS and how they introduce the model and what feels like it's important to keep in mind when you're using the model and kind of the limitations of it. Even if you are a therapist, it feels like you need to be so well versed in the IFS framework and your own parts. And it doesn't feel like most people are able to do that unless they've gone through some kind of specialized training. And, typically just being coached or just going to therapy or just introducing yourself and being self-led with IFS isn't enough in that case. And I guess that's where I'm trying to get curious around, what is enough? Where's that line exist? And wow, I've got a little rambly here. I feel like I've kind of leapfrogged from one thing to the next, but I was talking about the growth mindset and coaching and how I feel with IFS, at least when it comes to healing shame. It seems as though the coaching mindset can be kind of counter to that process because it's telling you need to keep on fixing something. But at the same time, if you can just accept yourself and work with those parts and unblend from those protector parts that just want to keep on growing and growing and working and they're kind of trying to solve something, right? Almost as a way of keeping you safe. Or they're in a way also probably trying to recapitulate. If you don't know what that means, it's basically you're trying to do things to complete just call it the story. Because there was a certain point where you didn't get something. And that kind of messed you up in a way, right? You felt incomplete because your parents didn't show up in a certain way. And as a result of that, you go on and try to complete that incompleteness, whether it's through your own experience or usually it's projected onto another person. And it does feel like a lot of us are just trying to kind of complete that story. And it's like something happened to us that feels like it just didn't quite fully go through. Gosh, I can't even think of how to word this. This is what it's like when I'm walking around in snow, everybody. This is how it's going for me. I feel like I'm a little bit more rambly. I feel like I just look at the snow in front of me and just kind of zone out. I'm also not drinking caffeine, so hopefully I got a little bit of slack there. But I feel like some of these topics are connecting together in a way, right? I was just talking about recapitulation, how, there's basically different styles of recapitulation. I can't remember them all out of the top of my head, but they're different ways. For some reason, I remember reaction formation. If you look up reaction formation, that's one of the recapitulation styles. But as a result of what you experienced when you were a child, something, it just felt like you didn't get something, right? It didn't fulfill you. It didn't, fulfill that need. You didn't get the parenting or the love or the attention you deserved. And it's like, now as an adult, the way that you show up in your life, particularly with others, but sometimes with yourself, with your own parts maybe, it's just trying to recomplete that cycle, or it's trying to find that thing so that, you can right that wrong. Oh, that's the word I was looking for. Oh, that's all about right and wrongs, but let's just say in your head, you felt like you were wronged long ago. And now these recapitulation styles are the ways you're trying to right that wrong. You're trying to, bring everything back into quote unquote harmony. But I would almost argue that your protector parts are trying to do this in a way that doesn't actually make any sense. And it's most likely, I'd say most certainly, but let's say most likely not going to get that quote unquote wrong righted. It's not actually going to change anything. It's not actually going to give you the closure you need, and might actually leave you feeling more disconnected, or it might actually trigger more shame, and it might actually bring you further away from self-acceptance if you keep on searching for something that you're trying to fix, and you enable those protector parts to kind of just dig their heels deeper into you. So, hope that makes sense. We got recapitulation styles. I was connecting that to how protector parts kind of choose to use those in a way to try to get stuff done or resolve some kind of past conflict or past trauma. And in coaching, if you're just eyes on the prize, go, kind of hustling all the time, sure, you're going to get some stuff done, and it's probably going to feel quite fulfilling. And I think there's various ways that coaching is highly beneficial to one's life, but from the lens of these shameful exiled parts in parts work or IFS, it's kind of like they're sitting there looking at you like, sorry, you're going to actually do the healing? Or you're just going to keep on going off all these little side quests? It's going to keep on searching for something to do while your unhealed, unintegrated shadow or trauma kind of just piggybacks on you, making you feel heavier and making your body feel more kind of battered and worn over the years. So it's kind of like, I can imagine there's ways you might be able to do both at the same time, maybe, right? But it did sound as though Martha Sweezy was pretty clear that even just using the word work, that's what I was saying, using the word work in therapy. All right, everybody, it's time to do the work. Kind of pull up the bootstraps and start kicking butt, plucking away at those goals. And it's like, even just doing that, you're basically siding with the protector part that's like, we got to grind and keep you safe, and in a way, distracting you from, maybe you can do some self-love work, right? Maybe you can turn towards yourself and notice what needs are going unmet, and what ways that you're denying yourself your experience, right? My one of my takeaways of not drinking caffeine over these last 7 days, is that I feel like I'm, in general, denying myself less. Right? The caffeine was just one of those ways I was distracting myself, and will probably continue to do so. Let's just be real. But yeah, there's something about how when that main thing wasn't present, that main layer of distraction was kind of stripped away, even temporarily, I've been starting to notice the other layers of distraction. And just feeling a little bit more free, getting back to the word autonomous. This feels kind of like full circle, maybe, with 5 or 6 or 7 different tangents back to the idea of autonomy. Just considering that, looking at my unfiltered perspective, not feeling like I'm sort of in the groove of distraction, right? I'm not doing the distraction dance. And I can just have a little bit more freedom and spaciousness to decide, okay, do I even really need to distract myself today? Do I even really need to drink that cup of whatever? And if I do, well, why? What's the point? Right? We get so in the groove, so to speak. We get so ingrained in our day-to-day, in our routine, which I love routine, but I think some of these routines are just like are out of comfort. We're in this autopilot mode, and we drink our caffeine as soon as we get up in the morning because it's kind of like, oh, well, I got to function somehow. Well, it's like, what if how you function that day is just where you needed to go and how you needed to show up in that day? What if functioning at that level, let's just say the hustle culture expectation, the standard, just doesn't make sense every day. It's just, it in some way is impractical and disrespectful to all parts of you. I would say, because you're enabling the protector part that identifies so strongly with that hustle culture. And so I just want to maybe introduce the idea, the possibility, that if you don't drink that caffeine, well, what if you need to lean into the emotional experience that the lack of caffeine is triggering, right? That frustration, that disappointment, that hopelessness. Because I had a cocktail of all of those experiences when I didn't drink caffeine, especially the first few days, right? It was like, man, life sucks. Oh my God, everybody's just so annoying. Oh God, everything just feels like it's just, I can't bear the weight of life, right? Makes things feel makes things feel quite unbearable when you're not drinking your caffeine or whatever, just doing that thing that's your comfort. It's giving you pleasure. It's your creature comfort. So hopefully we've cycled back to the concept in some way. I didn't really have a topic, right? But I'm walking through the snow. You get to hear my crunch crunch. And I brought in the idea of autonomy, but also kind of the double-edged sword of this type of autonomy where you're giving free rein to these protector parts to start to jump in and kind of bring you on all these little side quests and ultimately trying to right that wrong that at the end of the day, who knows if that's actually happening at all. And then there's these parts of you that are like standing along being like, hey, protector part, how about you just ease up on the gas a bit? And if you let the rest of us kind of come in and show some of these other feelings, or, you know, maybe just loosen the grip on the whole system, maybe another part steps in. Maybe it's self-energy, right? Maybe, you know, the combination of different parts come in and actually do a pretty good job at running the whole show. And the protector part can kind of humble themselves a bit and be like, oh, look at that. This part over here thinks they know how to run the ship, and then turns out they do. Or at least they do so differently. And I think that's just it. Just noticing how different things feel when a protector part's not in charge. Noticing how different things feel when you're not using your main creature comfort like caffeine. And when you have different people in your life, for instance, right? The cycles, the cycle breakers, quote unquote. But it's like, well, how do you feel when you've got new people around? When you've got new energy in your life? New auras, new fields, new nervous systems, new opportunities for experiences. And is that okay? Is different okay to you? How open are you? So thanks for tuning in. I hope this audio comes in okay. I'm really enjoying talking with you as I walk through the snow. And yeah, maybe leave me 5 stars if the crunching of the snow didn't piss you off too much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or afternoon or evening. Take care. I need more guests. So if you feel like you'd be a good guest, reach out. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, please reach out over Instagram, Facebook, or through my email, featheroflightcounseling@outlook.com. I have available slots for counseling. Additionally, I have parts workshops that I'm running each week. So Saturdays at 10 a.m. we'll be meeting this week and each week following, where we can bring in discussions around parts. You can share about things that you're noticing about your parts, and I will offer some education around working with your parts. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care. Bye.